Hi everyone, it's Lisa from I Dream in Soap. This soap is my entry for the December 2019 Soap Challenge hosted by Amy Warden. For the advanced category this month, we had to produce a soap that used at least 2 different soaping techniques, and it had to be coloured in black and white plus 1 additional colour. And that additional colour had to ombre from light to dark or from dark to light. Now for my inspiration, I used the famous painting The Scream by Edvard Munch. Now up until 2012, this was the most expensive painting ever sold at auction. It sold for nearly $120 million. Now Munch actually produced 4 versions of this picture, and he also produced a lithograph which enabled the picture to be printed and reproduced. And it's this lithograph I'm going to use for the bulk of the black and white elements of my soap. And then I'm going to bring in some colour from the paintings to fulfil the rest of the challenge criteria. Come on, let's go make some soap. I started off by making the head of the screaming man using some PVC pipes to produce some white columns. So I just took my normal soap batter recipe and I brought it up to a trace. And then I used titanium dioxide at a rate of 1 teaspoon per pound of oils, or 1 tablespoon per pound of oils when diluted, to get my white colour. I added the same fragrance oil as I was going to use for the bulk of the batch, and then I just carried on stick blending, which I don't normally do, but I wanted to get to a reasonably sort of medium type trace here because I was going to just have a simple pour into the column moulds. Once I poured into the column moulds, I just sealed the moulds up. And then I popped them into the fridge because I wanted to make sure that they didn't go through gel, because I wanted to preserve that nice solid white colour. And if they go through gel, then it kind of makes them a little bit more transparent. The next day, they were nice and solid, so I was able to unmould them. And I tend to just use the little lid off of another bottle, and I just use that to just push through and start the embed coming out. I don't line my plastic pipes at all, and I never find I have a problem unmoulding them. Once I had them unmoulded, I just took a drawing that I'd done to the actual size of the head that I wanted and just used this as a guide to cut out the basic shape of the head. And then once those were cut, I then changed to sort of a plastic scraper tool to help me sort of define the shape of the head a little bit more clearly. I ended up chopping each of the small columns in half, just because it was going to be really difficult that when I want to actually get the face in the heads, to actually get that going through straight so that the eyes and everything lined up. Now, I decided that I definitely wanted to do this. I didn't want to just paint faces on the surface, because I thought as you go and use the soap, what I don't want, considering the scream, the actual screaming face is the most important part of the picture, I wanted it to stay there as you use the soap. So I didn't just want to see it on the surface. So that's why I've got these sort of smaller length moulds, and I'm trying to just make sure that I can get the face all the way through them. So eventually I had them all done. God, that took quite a long while to do. So now I needed to make the actual features of the face. So again, I'm just bringing up some more soap batter. Again, it looks like quite a lot considering I want the features, but I'm going to need some black soap dough. So therefore this is a combined mixing for the features of the face and the black soap dough that I'm going to use. I'm colouring my black with a mixture of black oxide and activated charcoal, and together I'm combining them and using them at a rate of 1 teaspoon per pound of oils. And then I've got all my little heads and I've sort of got them wedged into this tray so that they don't fall over. And I'm just using a pipette and injecting as far down into the heads as I can and giving them a bit of a wobble and a bang to try and just make sure that I get the black going all the way down through the features. And then the rest of the black batter, I then just got to a thicker trace, and that was going to be my black soap dough. So I just popped it into a mould, and this time with the black, I did want to force gel. So I did cover this, insulate it, and I popped it in an oven and popped it. The next day, I then took all my little heads and I've planed them because I need them to be as smooth as possible so that I can actually stick them together without any gaps and turn them into a column mould. Now they're still a little bit sticky, which is good because I do want them to stick together. And I just put a little bit of distilled water on them and went through and turned them into a column of heads. And then I just spent a little while just moving through the column and just trying to make sure there was no gaps at all in my head column, as it were, and just making sure that they were going to stick together as well as possible. I then wrapped it up so it wouldn't dry out and moved on to the body. For the body, I've got some of that soap dough I'd previously made, and what I was looking at doing is with the body I've noticed that there were some white stripes that went up through the black clothing of the scream. So I'm splitting my sort of body dough as it were here, and I'm just going to try and insert some very thin layers of that white soap dough I made and sort of smush them all together to hopefully get those stripes in that I need. Now I'm not sure how well you can see this, but I've trimmed the body into the body shape that we need. And then I'm now just cutting sort of like a V-shaped groove so that I can make the neck and then eventually put the head in when I go and put everything together. So there's my finished body with its stripes that I wanted. And now I'm going to start making the arms. So I'm just literally got some more of that black soap dough and I'm just rolling it out. And then I've sort of flattened it a bit and I need a slight bend in the arms. So that's why I'm sort of squishing it out over my rolling pin. Now, the white soap dough here is, I feel I want a bit of definition. I don't want the arms to just blob into the side of the body. I want to see a separation. So therefore I'm doing a really, really thin layer of white soap dough that's going to go just between the arm and the body, just to give a little definition so you can actually see that those are two actual different parts. And now back again to the white soap dough. I'm going to use this to make the hands that wrap around the scream's face. I do find it much easier if you want to roll out some soap dough or squash it or whatever. If you just lay it between some film, then it doesn't stick and it's a lot easier to actually get it rolled out. Jumped a little bit ahead here, and as you can see I've attached one of the hands, and now I'm just filling in the neck area, and I'm using fluid soap batter, sort of a fairly thick trace to stick the head onto, and then just popping the head in, and I'm trying to really squish the hands as close as I possibly can to the face to make sure that they're wrapping round as in the picture, and also to make sure I get no air bubbles. And once again, to get that definition, I've painted the white soap dough with some black soap batter so that again we can see a difference between the face and the hands on the face, because they'll have a little black line in between them. Once I'm happy that everything was all squished together, I've then painted the top of the scream's head. And again, this is to just give it a little bit more definition. You might notice that at the very end, there's a little bit of spare scream head there. I've still got that sitting in my kitchen. I didn't need it for the embed, that bit that's all fully done is what I need for my mould, so I didn't need that extra bit. Weirdly, I haven't had the heart to throw the head away yet, so it's still sitting on the side in my kitchen. So now my embed's finished, I'm going to move on to the body of the soap. So I'm mixing up some more black and white soap batter to sort of just past emulsion, a very light trace. And I'm starting off with doing the boardwalk. So I'm aiming at doing sort of black and white layers on a slanted layer technique for the main boardwalk, and then a solid black layer to form that first handrail. So hopefully my mould, you can sort of see through it. I know it's not at the best angle perhaps for you. And what I've done is I've used a fragrance oil that accelerates really quite quickly. So I've just gone with my first little white layer, and I actually just put a few drops of fragrance oil in here, and it just accelerated really, really fast. So in the other layers, I actually put a few less drops in. So as you can see, I've popped it in, it set up really quickly, and then I've been able to make that layer the shape that I wanted to. And again with the black, but this time I've put slightly less fragrance oil. I literally just put a couple of drops in, and at this point at least I was able to sort of tip it around to get a nice flat layer, and then again just scrape it to the angle that I wanted. And then I just repeated that a number of times until I'd got all my boardwalk done and that first handrail layer all completed. Aha, so time now for another soap dough embed. What I'm doing now is the uprights of the handrail, and this is just some more black soap dough that I made previously, and as you can see I'm just using a potato peeler to try and make those sort of handrail shapes. I just took the handrails and pushed them into the top of that sort of white layer on the top of the boardwalk. So what I'm just doing here is I'm scraping away this white top layer, and the reason for this is when I pop the sort of upright struts of wood in against that bottom bit of the handrail, I want to make sure that they actually connect, so I need the two black bits to connect together, whereas if I left them sitting on the white they would look like they're floating. So I've just popped them in again with some distilled water to make sure they stick, and now I can move on to getting the embed in. I've mixed up some fresh bit of soap batter and put in some fragrance oil in it. And what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to just use this to just make sure that embed sticks in really well. And again, I'm just going to take my little pipette and just squirt in some nice fluid bits of soap batter, just to make sure I'm not going to get any air pockets between what's now quite firm, that boardwalk that I've made, and the embed. So I'm just trying to fill that and feel underneath. Haha, time for colours at last. I've got all my micas made into colour swatches, so I'm just mucking around with my swatches, just trying to pick the ones that best fitted the ombre that I need. And as you can see, I just keep changing my mind and eventually arrive at something that I'm happy with, and that helps me pick the micas that I want. So once again, I've mixed out some fairly small amounts of soap batter, and I've got it in 2 pots, and I'm just dropping some of the blue colour into one of the pots and keeping one of the others white. And what I'm aiming to do here is to start my ombre between those handrails that I've just laid down, and I just know that I've got to obviously tie this in with what's going to be the ombre on the other side. I found it easier again to use some pipettes because I couldn't really pour in between those rails very well, so the pipettes were just a nice way for me to sort of consistently get some nice stripy thin lines in there. So I just carried on adding the stripes of the soap until I'd got the ombre effect up nice and level with the top of the uprights. I let it set up a little bit, and then I just made sure it was nice and flat, because next I wanted to go and pour that top layer of the handrail on, so I wanted a smooth surface to start with. So back to black once more. And this is my final time that I'm going to have to do the very top handrail. So just using the same technique as I did the first time through, mixing up that black soap and then just pouring in. And as I'm going through and I'm smoothing the handrail through, and I'm trying to make it fatter towards the centre and skinnier towards the outside, just to make sure I get that sort of perspective to look like the handrail is actually disappearing off into the distance. And once my handrail's done, I'm back to the ombre effect, and this time I'm mixing up a little bit more batter and I'm starting down the other side of my soap mould. And what I'm trying to do here is obviously build up my ombre just so it's level with the top of the scream's head. And I'm just really conscious that I want to try and match the ombre on both sides. So this time I'm starting with a lighter colour right at the bottom, so that by the time I get up to the middle, it will match with what's between the handrails. And then hopefully I can flow the ombre above the scream's head and then finish off with the white of the sea coming in at the top. Now for all the parts of the soap apart from that original boardwalk, I did use a fragrance oil that doesn't accelerate, but as you can see here my batter is thickening up and I'm really struggling to get these lines in nicely, so I'm having to bang it down quite a lot. I think it's probably just the combination of the blues in the micas and the titanium dioxide that's sort of causing that batter to thicken up, because I have actually soaped probably cooler than I normally like to soap, but I am still having a little bit of trouble getting those lines in as I'd like them. And then with my final bit of white, I'm just sort of plopping it on the top. And I do have a purpose for this, I'm not just dumping it. I'm trying to actually produce that sort of white bit that's in the sea at the top. So I've dumped it in quite hard and I'm banging it down because I need it to try and sink into the batter so I actually get the shape that I need. So I'm just finishing up the top with a few little bits of the blue batter that's left and giving it a good tap down. And then I'm just going to put quite a simple pattern. I don't want any fancy swirls or anything on the top, so just sort of quite a nice simple sort of spiky pattern on the top. Now I do want this to go through gel, so I am going to cover it up. My batter's come right to the top of my soap mould, and I was planning this because the embed was quite tall. So I have made some sort of little extra spacers that you'll see in a second that I'm just going to put on so that I can rest my lid on without it actually touching the soap. It'll then get wrapped up and then popped overnight in the oven. And then we'll get it out to cut it. Now unfortunately something went really weird with my video when I tried to do my cutting video, so I've kind of just sort of abandoned it and just done some sort of swirly look at the soaps. They're not quite finished yet, I'm going to do some extra bits and pieces to them, so just a quick look at them at this stage before I finish them off. So now that I've got the bulk of my soap done, I want to just finish it off by adding just these tiny little details from the Scream's face. Now I'm really happy that I've got the main elements of the face, the eyes and the mouth, and they're going to go all the way through the soap and not wear out as you use the soap. But I do just want to add these extra little details, so I'm going to use an inlaid design technique where what you do is you're just going to literally scratch down into the soap and then replace the bits that you've scratched out with some soap dough. So what I actually did with mine is I went through with all of my bars and scratched out the design first, and that way what happens is the indentations that you make sort of harden up a little bit, so then when you go back and put the soap dough in them, then those little indentations will stay and the soap dough will fill them nicely. I'm just literally just pushing everything down in and then just clearing off the soap dough that I've put in. Now it does look like I'm being quite rough, but I'm being really gentle and just being very careful not to scratch the soap underneath. And as you can see, as you go through, you can then reveal the final design. And we've got his face and all of his features there for us. Oh, and in case you were wondering, look, I still haven't thrown that silly little bit of embed head away. He's got hair now. And then finally, I'll just leave you with some shots of the finished soap, including the side view where you can see that ombre really well. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please leave me a thumbs up and maybe even a comment below. If you want to see what I produce in future, then why not hit the subscribe button. Thanks for watching everyone. Happy soaping!